Okay, hello everybody. Hi, I'm Paul Grand, CEO here at MedTech Innovator. This is the MedTech Innovator Live series. So what we do here at MedTech Innovator, we're an accelerator for medical device, diagnostic, and digital health technology. And we work with some of the largest companies in the world to find some of the most innovative companies in the world that we believe can really be those next generation products that will be successful. And as part of our accelerator program, we put together a webinar series that allows us to have an opportunity for these experts to connect with our startups and our scale-ups so that they can ask questions and they can learn from the experts. And as part of that, we open it up to people who are on YouTube or who are tuning in on the MedTech Innovator website. And for those of you who are on YouTube, you can also access medtechinnovator.org/live for the archive of all of these webinars. We've been doing them since the beginning of the program this year, and actually been doing them for in the past for 5 years before this, or 6 years. So you can watch the archives of those, and you can also see what's coming up there. You can subscribe to the upcoming webinars as well so that you get alerts. Today, we're going to be talking about partnering with payers and providers. It's a really, really important topic. One of the things that, I know that all of you, if you're a startup or a scale-up that's out there, you're ultimately thinking about interacting with a customer of some kind and interacting with someone who's going to pay for your product in many cases. And that's something that, although it may be years away, what you're doing right now is going to have a huge impact on your ultimate ability to connect with those people and to be successful together. And it's a collaboration that you're missing out on if you're not talking to them early. So I'm really excited about today's discussion. We're going to have an opportunity to meet some people that I've had a chance to know for a while now who are really involved in innovation and the kinds of technologies that you're all developing. So they have great insights. It's going to be a great webinar today to hear from them. So we're going to start off. And before I make the introductions to our panelists, I want to make sure I give again the directions. So for those of you who are tuning in via YouTube Live, you have the opportunity to ask questions through the chat box on the side of the screen. If you ask questions there, I will be monitoring that chat and I will try to address some of those questions during the discussion. If you're doing this through our webinar, which means you're logged into Zoom, you've probably done this a whole bunch of times, but just in case, at the bottom of the screen, there's a chat button. You can click that. That will open up a little box where you can prompt me if there's something you want me to do as a follow-up, for example, or if you're interested in asking a question as part of our Q&A, which is, those of you who've done this before know, is the last 30 minutes. So we have the first hour, which is which is public for everyone on YouTube. And the last 30 minutes is private Q&A just for our webinar cohort, the companies in the MedTech Innovator Accelerator. So if you're a MedTech Innovator Accelerator company, please just enter your questions using the Q&A function again at the bottom of the screen. So with that, let's get to our webinar and talk to our panelists. So first off, I'm going to introduce Sandra Powell Elliott, who will tell you about herself and what she does at Hackensack Meridian Health. She's the VP for Life Sciences and Innovation. So Sandra, tell us about yourself and what you do at your firm.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. I'm actually representing the provider side of this presentation today. And I think one of the things that is important to know is one of the areas of opportunity that we focus in on, not only on internal innovation, but is the next, what we term external innovation, which is really about identifying companies like that are on this webinar today, and also the companies that work diligently with MedTech Innovator for innovative and transformative technologies that we can bring into the network. And part of that is to really drive and transform what we do for patients, both on diagnostic sides as well as the therapeutic side. We spend a little less on effort on the digital health side, but mainly because digital health is a little harder for us as an organization to really integrate fully into Epic. We are an Epic shop. But at the outset, we also look for investment opportunities. And so as it relates to investment, it's an easier play for us from a clinical perspective to think about, and also operational perspective, to think about investment beyond just digital, those things that are going to have platform capability for the network. well beyond a digital solution. So, so with that, I'll turn it back over to Paul. But I'm anxious to have this conversation and hear a little bit on the payer side from Ben as well.
Sorry, I muted myself. That's a great segue. So let me introduce Ben. So Ben is the business development manager over at Vital Innovations, which is part of Highmark Health. He'll tell you all about himself and a little bit about Highmark, and then Vital, and then I'll dig into some more questions after that. So Ben.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Paul, for the warm introduction, as well as the opportunity to engage with MedTech Innovator and your new cohort. So as Paul mentioned, my name's Benjamin Echeazu. Most people call me Ben. When I hear Benjamin, especially when it sounds like 3 different words, I'm a little bit worried. That's usually the parents, and I've done something pretty bad. So that's pretty much me from a personal perspective. Look, I'm a British national over here in the US doing some great work at Highmark Health. Some of the stuff that I do requires, having a global mindset, a global perspective. I will apologize up front now because most likely I will slip back and forth between a British and American accent. And I know it typically tends to, be a slight disruptor. So in case you hear some odd British words come out, please forgive me. So with that said, look, my background is within the pharmaceuticals, business development, commercialization, and growth opportunities. Started off as a pharmacist, but a business developer at heart. Spent some time both in the pharmaceutical industry on the medical side, and then converted over to the commercial side. Transitioned over to Highmark Health, brought into Highmark Health to be part of the strategy and transformation organization at Highmark Health. Thinking about how we begin to shape the market around innovation and what we term, and I think this is a term that's used externally, how do we help accelerate the right innovation? So upfront, identify the appropriate innovation, and how do we begin to accelerate it? Because we do believe that innovation, being able to identify the right innovation, accelerating it, will become a key differentiator for us, be it for our members as well as our providers. And so we always think about, how can we get upfront and help not just ourselves, but also help the innovation companies build out what we consider a transparent pathway and an accelerated pathway to be a medical policy and coverage decisions. So with that said, I'm happy to talk to you about Highmark Health, but I just want to make sure that we're okay on that. Paul?
We are okay on that. Yeah, no, that's a perfect introduction and a great way of setting things up. So thank you both. So Ben, one of the things that I've always been fascinated by since I heard about Vital and the great work you guys are doing over there is this concept that you kind of just teed up a little bit, which is accelerating these medical technologies, the right medical technologies, I think you called it. I say something very similar when we talk about MedTech Innovator. It's like there's lots of innovation out there. Sandra, you said something similar as well, but it's about finding the ones that really can have an impact on not only human health, but also are going to be right for the healthcare providers, for the payers, for everything else, for all the stakeholders. Whether it's lowering costs, there's lots of different ways to slice that, improving outcomes, et cetera. But when I heard about Vital originally, it was like this eye opener for me, because it was this program that I know at the outset, the thinking behind it was to find innovation that was perhaps approved already or close to being approved, that wasn't yet covered and could have the ability to really have an impact perhaps on your population and your members, and recognizing that someone's got to accelerate these things if they could really have an impact. And so I was fascinated by that concept. I know it's evolved over time. I know you've worked with some MedTech Innovator companies as well. So love to have you tell us the story about Vital, how it came about, what you do there, and how you work with health innovators.
No, it's a fantastic question, Paul. So I think you and I share the same. We share the same thoughts as to how exciting Vital is. So I will say up front that I did not create Vital. I mean, there are a lot smarter people at Highmark Health who developed it. But I engaged and joined the team for the exact same reasons, because I thought it was pretty captivating, thinking about who Highmark Health is. So think about Highmark Health as this large blended healthcare organization, second largest integrated delivery and finance and network in the US, a company based in Pittsburgh, the parent company of Highmark Inc., which is a Blue Cross Blue Shield Association licensee, Allegheny Health Network, which is our provider system, with about 8 to 10 hospitals within the region, and then HM Health Solutions, which is another, one of our diversified companies. Thinking about the scope, Highmark Health is responsible for about 5 million lives, within the coverage area of, Pennsylvania, West Virginia and Delaware. And so thinking about that level of scope, I think, Vital was almost a perfect understanding that when we looked out into the market, what we identified was that, unless there was acceleration of important new FDA approved healthcare innovations, if that's not, if that wasn't done, what we had was what you call the innovation, valley of death, right? And so typically most payers and most provider organizations are waiting for longitudinal data, which could be 6 or 7 years. And we felt strongly that if we could, efficiently shorten that time span and take a little bit of risk upfront for the right innovation, that we could significantly change, one, the course of a patient's diagnosis or the course of a patient's life. And to us, we think that is so significant. And that's why we've gone down this pathway of putting together Vital Innovations, which is a test and learn platform that's unique within our ecosystem. Our goal is to look at solutions that are just either on the cusp of regulatory approval, if they need the regulatory approval, and if they don't, we want to see solutions that are just about, getting ready to get commercialized. And what we believe is that we can help them develop the requisite evidence to be able to scale this innovation, valley of death and move progressively from cutting edge innovation to medical policy or reimbursement. And so, with that said, we've been very fortunate. And again, I would say thank you very much to Paul. We've been very fortunate to work with some of your, alumni, MedTech Innovator alumni. We're currently, I would say we have most likely about two of them within our portfolio now. One being Moving Analytics, which is a company, very engaging group. So it's a company looking at how to drive cardiac rehab and thinking about it more from a remote perspective. So today we understand cardiac rehab, typically brick and mortar facilities, biggest challenges, lack of engagement, initiation to treatment is pretty slow, and some of the cost factors around that, right? And so what this group is doing is looking to how do we digitize this and how do we begin to move it remote and have our patients and members engage with it from home. And so we're very excited. Moving Analytics has moved and progressed past the first phase of our program, and they're actually in the testing phase. And so I would say we just did like an interim analysis, and we're really excited about some of the data that we're seeing. Happy to share some more information and some more details. The second group is Spry Health. And Spry Health is doing some really engaging work as well with us. So Spry Health is currently looking at the acute exacerbations of COPD and the opportunity to use their wearable to begin to identify these exacerbations ahead of time. And that way we can choose the appropriate, level or acuity of care for that particular member. And so sometimes we don't have to wait till the final exacerbation and, find that member is ending up, be it in the emergency department or, as an inpatient. And so that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to think through how do we begin to engage these innovations that we believe could have significant impact on, one, bending the cost curve, as well as improving the member experience.
Terrific examples, Ben. Thank you. And, it's so interesting because talk about two companies whose, right company, right time, right? Where we are in the pandemic, they would have been right anyways. I mean, these would have been technologies that we all were moving towards anyways, but clearly these are innovations that, have a particular space right now. And the fact that you're getting involved with them early gives them probably a boost of years where you potentially might have had to sit back, as you were saying before, and wait for them to have the longitudinal data that ultimately might convince someone to purchase this product. So I think that's pretty terrific that you're doing that. So we'll get more into the details of how your program works in a little bit. I'm going to go over to Sandra for a minute. So Sandra, I know that you're leading the charge there in terms of a team looking at external innovation, and the work that you're doing there also is pretty fascinating. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what's the change that you're seeking in working with external innovation, and what are some of the ways that you engage with innovators, specifically in the medtech space?
So I think, there are a couple of things in particular that we're looking for. And as a provider, and much like has been mentioned, having an integrated delivery system is a really critical component to being able to do some very unique things, particularly creating a value opportunity for a lot of early stage companies, and better understanding where the value of a particular diagnostic or therapeutic or digital therapeutic can actually end up being greater than maybe the innovator initially thought. So for us as a network, we have 17, soon to be 18 hospitals. We cover 5 million patient population in our state. We are the largest in the state. But one of the unique things that we have as well is the ability to actually tie a lot of what we're doing to our clinical research programs, some of our population health programs, because we do have with a Horizon Blue Cross an actual plan that we're offering for Medicare Advantage starting next year. So we can begin to understand from even an employee health perspective and leveraging new technologies and evaluating those new technologies from an employee health perspective all the way to how does cellular mechanics change as a result of using a particular device, or potentially driving the right research protocol to get you further along in your regulatory approval process, for example, than others. But I think, at the core, one of the areas that we're talking about really focusing our efforts on are those things that dramatically move the needle in three different areas. One is operational efficiency from a standpoint of being able to either diagnose earlier in the process, or at a lower cost point on the care continuum, for example, so that we can drive a therapeutic or an intervention specifically sooner. That'll decrease the overall cost of care, hopefully, for not only us, but for payers as well. Secondarily, anything that drives a metric on quality. So a lot of the quality metrics that are associated with, the U.S. News and World Report, your typical readmission rates, infection rates, C-section rates, anything that has a dramatic ability to drive that change as an outcome for the organization, because that's only going to put us further along in our ability to provide value to the payer, for example, but at the same time, doing the right thing and the best thing for the patients that we serve on a day-to-day basis, and learning from that as well. And how does that help us transition for the future? We all know that as a health system in delivering care, we have to change for the future. So even when we are identifying how we can actually take better care of our patients, we need to understand the impact on the organization at large, and how that means we have to restructure what we do and how we do it in the future to be able to maintain the gains that we're seeing potentially on quality or cost metrics for the organization and for the payers that we serve.
So that's really interesting, Sandra, when I'm thinking about this now. So, I think often people think about, a provider and, they're just a customer, it's purchasing, and, they're going to go in and convince them to, buy this product. But you're doing something that's, that's much further upstream, and that's more about collaboration. So, when you're, I guess, maybe give us a couple examples, perhaps, of some of the kinds of partnerships or pilots that you're doing, early on with companies, and what are some of the aspects maybe of the collaborations that, that you're part of, because I know it's not just about, someone coming in and telling you what they have. They're missing out on that opportunity to collaborate and kind of come up with a solution that's what you need. So maybe tell us a little bit about some of the examples, if you can, of some of the successful partnerships and pilots, and what makes them successful.
So an interesting one that we're doing right now and actually launching is really tied to kind of, we have this process where people pitch to us all the time, either for investment or strategic partnerships. And I will say that when that occurs, we see a new technology, not just as it's presented to us, but we begin to understand where it can be utilized in different use cases and opportunities that may be bigger than maybe the inventor initially identified. So one in particular, and it's a digital area that we're really focused in on, and it's really on speech, and not just your Amazon Alexa, can you automate a process, but really, how do I take the spoken word and begin to understand clinically what's going on, what's driving the unique nuances at what I'll call that underlying typical of what we can hear, to help us diagnose and treat and make it easier for access for diagnostics, for example, for readmission reduction. So we have a company, for example, that came to us to talk to us about the leveraging of speech and speech technology to help diagnose stress, anxiety, depression. What we began to learn when we started talking to them a lot more was really understanding that, going back to kind of from a payer perspective, where our biggest opportunity would be isn't necessarily in identifying depression and anxiety as a direct treatment or as a direct diagnosis to then treat. It's more of a supplemental to a bigger clinical problem where we have an opportunity to not only provide therapy and treatment, but it's to support the ongoing nature of a chronic condition. So we actually are starting to work with them in a joint development arrangement where we will leverage mobile technology, where a person will basically give their vital signs, and we're going to focus in on the reduction of readmissions for congestive heart failure. Can I tell first through your voice whether or not you are actually getting at risk for a readmission? So there's a whole process of data analytics, the scientific nature of what goes on, both in not just as what's the word I'm looking for, at a cognitive level for depression and anxiety and stress, but what's going on in your body that's physically changing what noise, whether or not it's the noise that we can hear, but how those technologies are actually able to identify early stage complications or an exacerbation, so that we can easily or more readily help identify which patients may need help. The benefit of doing that is everybody has a voice for the most part. Most patients have a voice, and it's an easier way to access and engage a patient. So it's an example of how, while we decided not to put money in because they really didn't need money as much as they needed a patient base and a clinical expertise to help them design the right product and the right solution to meet the need of a health system. And that health system need was readmission reduction. That's just one example. We do put money in, we help facilitate other processes as well, but it goes from joint development to pilots, commercial pilots, clinical programs that are associated with clinical trials, the gamut of all different types of relationships that we're willing to entertain to help early stage companies.
Terrific. Lots to unpack there. So let's go back to Ben for this next one then. One of the things that I know people ask a lot about is this kind of balance between improving clinical outcomes and economic benefits. And, obviously, ideally, you're doing both. Ideally, you're lowering costs and improving outcomes. And the question that, I think companies have is this question of, what's the balance between the two? And are there cases still where if the clinical outcome is significant enough, then, it's okay if it's not lowering cost? So how do you think about that, as a payer?
Thanks, Paul. That's a fantastic question. So it's actually really interesting because I think about the the clinical as well as the economic balance as what I would consider the old model. And so how we like to look at it at Vital and at Highmark is actually looking at a trifecta. So thinking about the clinical, thinking about the economics, as well as thinking about the experience. And so the experience is so critical to us. We know a lot of models where the clinical is high, the economics are great, but we actually don't get the engagement, right? And so we know the solution works, the clinical maps out and the economics look great, but for lack of better terms, the stickiness factor, the engagement factor is just not there because the ease of use, the convenience is not really there. So we try to take more of a holistic approach and we look at clinical, economic, and experience. And what we typically strive for is to see, we want to see great metrics in all three. But in some cases, we will look at either one of these two. And if we can get great metrics on 2 out of the 3, we're also very comfortable. One of the things that we've embodied within, everybody at Highmark and Vital is to think through really strong clinicals and let the economics play out where it plays out. And so if we have a solution that has very strong clinical and real compelling experience, and when I talk about experience, this is the experience to the patient or the member, as well as the experience to the provider. And so long as we have both of those that are pretty strong, we'll let the economics play out. And I mean, when we think about economics, there's a lot of potential to negotiate and think about, the value-based agreements, things of that nature. And so I think that for us, we truly believe that it's the trifecta and, engage in ensuring that we have a good balance. Another point to make on the experience piece is that we think that is extremely compelling for a couple of reasons. We know that within social circles, so if we had a member who truly, I'll give you an example, if they truly latched onto the move-in analytics solution, so the move-in cardiac rehab solution, we know that from peer-to-peer engagement within social circles, things like, be it word of mouth or peer-to-peer influencing, can actually help us bring out or map out some of these patients and members who've fallen through the cracks, who are no longer fully engaged. And so that peer-to-peer engagement is so critical. And we believe that so long as we continue looking at the clinical, the economic, and the experience, we're able to catch those individuals and bring them back into, engaging with us and ensuring that they are actually being appropriately managed, from the care pathway. So.
No, super interesting. Anything, Sandra, that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think, I think it's interesting because I think for us as a, integrated delivery system, we've got patient populations in all segments. And sometimes engagement is, I don't want to say less important, but different. It's different depending on the patient population that you're targeting. So for us, that trifecta is probably not only the clinical outcomes, and high clinical is definitely an area of opportunity for us. And the economics are really driven not only on what we call just dollars for dollars, but also a time frame. So for us as a network, it's not just in an ability to create an outcome at a lower cost, but it's also what does it do from a time frame perspective? Is it a 30-day turnaround? A return on investment basically becomes very dictated on some of the opportunities that may exist even within our own network, where we don't have the capacity to take more patients, i.e. more revenue, because we're not getting patients in and out of the facilities, in and out of the emergency room. It's a very different kind of competitive nature. So for us, engagement is important, but it's very different depending on the segment of the population that we're targeting, both clinically and operationally.
Thank you. And I guess, for both of you, again, too, other thing, we didn't really talk about in terms of, the trifecta, also, safety for caregivers, that I know is another piece, right, as well? Yeah, I see nodding heads, but we can't all see you, but they're nodding. Okay.
Well, I would say, you know, absolutely. And I think safety then becomes a very different metric, right? Depending on the kind of safety that you're beginning to demonstrate. For us as a network, it's about, you know, does it minimize our risk for workers' compensation claims or other claims in general on the team member side? And right now it's interesting because of, you know, the relationship, the situation we all find ourselves in from a pandemic perspective is the ability to minimize risk for infection, risk for exposure. There's, you know, and that's a very timely, you know, kind of opportunity. And in some markets, that's actually a competitive advantage when you're running short on staff. So it's a very interesting dynamic that we find ourselves in for team member safety in particular, and team member monitoring for exposures, for example.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know we have companies in our portfolio who are, you know, who are very rightfully seeing a lot of growth right now because they have solutions that are minimizing risk for caregivers and are allowing, you know, a reduction in PPEs and just, you know, providing better safety overall. So, you know, I think, again, I think there's so much room for innovation, and these, you know, all these technologies really interesting, but when you see something that just fits and slots so nicely into kind of the needs we have now, I think those are, you know, those are things that are really going to drive the future for all of us, and not just be hopefully, you know, just a temporary thing that's solving something.
Yeah, I would like to just add a comment to that because I think it's important, particularly for early stage companies that see this as a pivot point to create some market traction for themselves. They need to be extremely careful. If it truly is what I'll call more of an adjacent opportunity that helps open up a market for you that you didn't necessarily see, but also gets them exposed to your technology or your solution, that's totally fine. But please be careful in not pivoting to the hot topic of the time frame just because you can. And I see more digital oriented technology companies doing that. Sometimes it's a great pivot for them. A lot of times it's not. So be careful. It takes you away. It takes up resources. And, you know, it's always very important to keep, you know, kind of consistent on who you are and what you're trying to accomplish as a company and an early stage company, and stay as true to that as you possibly can.
I second what Sandra said there. I think, you know, when you know, if we dial back a few months ago, you know, so thinking about maybe March, April, you know, with the COVID pandemic, what's happened is that there's been this, you know, quick pivot for a lot of companies. And, you know, the risk with that is that you begin to blunt your message and you begin to create confusion in the market. So for us, you know, sometimes we look at a company and sometimes we're thinking that's a bit of a stretch. And we all, you know, we can identify other solutions that are more, I guess, more aligned with solving that particular problem. And so I think, look, at this point, we don't know whether this is temporary or, you know, whether we're going to have to live with COVID for a lot longer. But I think, you know, stay in the course. And if you definitely see a strong, compelling reason to have a slight pivot, then that's also fair. But I think stay in the course, because if this becomes something that's, you know, fingers crossed, we're able to transition past, then what do? You're shaping yourself back into that original market where you've completely lost traction. And I've seen it happen with a couple of companies now where, you know, we've been very eager to do some work with them within the CKD space, but somehow they've just totally pivoted to, you know, to COVID, and they've pretty much missed a huge opportunity because we've now had to look at another group to work with. And so by the time they actually come back in and say, hey, well, you know, we're ready to work with you, I mean, the other group is already 6-8 months down the road. So it's really important to stay true to your message and what your vision and goals are.
Great advice from you both on that. We give similar advice to companies all the time. You know, if it's not core to what you're doing, don't get distracted. And certainly, you know, there's great opportunity to help people, and you know, that we don't want them to avoid or to shirk that responsibility. But you know, as you said, we are going to transition past this in some ways. So let's talk a little bit about business model for both of you. You know, I'll go back to you, Ben, first. So, you know, Vital, explain, you know, the business model and how you work with outside innovators.
That's great. So the Vital business model, look, we are what you consider a commercial offering. And so the way I like to sum this up is that, look, we're a commercial offering that provides, expertise, support, collateral, and a clear pathway to reimbursement and coverage decisions for, shared therapeutic areas that are key to Highmark's strategic focus and hopefully align with the innovators that we're working with. We have a product offering. And so this is split between two major products, one being, an opportunity assessment that we work with innovative companies on. And when I talk about an opportunity assessment, what I'm really talking about is being able to take data out of our claims database to be able to help a company shape what the potential impact of this solution will be on the current standard of care, as well as, be it the utilization metrics within that space. And this is a really robust document that I consider, part and parcel of business case on both parties' sides to be able to truly understand the value that the solution could potentially bring to the market. Things of when we think about pricing, I mean, that varies depending on what the project looks like. And I'm happy to have a detailed discussion about that with anyone who's further interested. But the second piece of the project, is the prospective test. So if you think about the first piece being hypothesis generating, then what we do is take that hypothesis and begin to build out a true prospective test. So, a lot of the study design, study recruitment, data collection, data analysis, getting our reimbursement and policy folks on board, being able to map that out and close out that study, that becomes the second product that's delivered. And that's truly what your real world evidence package is. Other benefits that we add onto the program in this business model is being able to build in a publication component, which I think serves every one of the stakeholders very well. So be it on the provider side, be it on the payer side, as well as the innovator. And then, as I mentioned earlier on, when we think about that longitudinal data that typical payers are looking for, what we're doing is we're accelerating this and shortening it so that we are able to do it within a 2-year time span, 1 to 2 years. And that way, the final piece of the puzzle is what we consider our value tracking offering, which is part and parcel of the VITAL program, but that's post-adoption and post-reimbursement coverage decisions. We're able to continue to track the metrics or the outcomes observed during the prospective test and ensure for the next 2 years that they either maintain or we find ways to iterate and improve on them. And so, look, it's a very interesting model. I don't think there are a lot of payers who are currently using this model, but I think the goal of the model is how do we streamline, accelerate, and build transparency within the system. And like I said, I'm happy to go into further details as required. Does that help?
Yeah, no, super helpful. And we'll probably go into some of that detail during the Q&A towards after the first hour. So, we can go into some more depth there. And Sandra, you mentioned before working with innovators and, we invest in them sometimes, you said, and, we collaborate. So, just again, in terms of, business model, I assume you don't invest in everybody that you collaborate with at an early stage, but, just again, quickly, maybe, some of the business model and how you work with innovators.
Yeah, so, it's pretty straightforward when you're putting money into an organization. It's just based on the valuation. And one of the things that we'll also do is evaluate what we feel our value beyond just the cash can be in order to help an organization meet its inflection points or its value improvement points, if you will, because we know just having a provider who's really successfully utilizing the technology or the solution is a huge value opportunity, and it creates and validates a use case very differently from other types of capital, if you will. So having said that, one of the things we're very open to joint development. It could be almost in a joint venture type manner. It depends on the solution, but we will work directly with an organization, either with cash going in a joint venture or literally providing services for equity. So it depends a lot on what's going on. with that organization. So there are other avenues that we can create opportunities for those companies, particularly if it's closer in line with some of our strategic research areas, which are in cancer, infectious disease, and regenerative medicine, because we can creatively get additional dollars using some of our scientists, very specifically helping to go after NIH funding and other non-dilutive funding. So as a result of that, we will ask for a certain level of equity at certain proof points as a result of that effort, because we can bring a lot of that to the table. And there's huge value in that additional non-dilutive funding. The other thing we'll do, quite honestly, is we bring a lot of other funding opportunities to the table, funders, if you will. So organizations that are either venture-based capital companies, or even some that are private traded companies that are potentially we are a customer of, that also make investments in companies. So if they see that we are absolutely seeing a clinical value and pushing the science and pushing the use case in a way that makes it make sense within a health system, they're much more open to putting some additional capital in. It's a different kind of due diligence in their mind. So it creates opportunities. We don't ask for fees or anything for that. We're just bringing a lot of money, hopefully, to the table at the same time of our money, because we know, as a health system, we're not going to put tons of money into companies, but we're going to put a lot of effort, and we will also, as a result of that, we want to see that organization be successful. So we know bringing additional capital will help.
Great. You talked about, investing in companies. So, I know these are often early companies, and the companies, Ben, that you're working with are early stage, right? These aren't, public companies in most cases, probably. So if we're talking about, stage, what's the I guess the question is, what's the right time for companies to approach you, in terms of their development? When is the right time for a company to come see you? I'll start with you first, Ben. So what's the right stage in their development?
So that's a great question. So for us, I'd like to think about Highmark again. Maybe this is where I sort of split, and I think about Vital, and I think about, AHN and our research institute. So we've got a research institute called the Allegheny Singer Research Institute. And, the way I like to position it is that if a company's really early and you want to test your solution out within our population, then that's, it's a good time to be able to go over to the Allegheny Singer Research Institute and begin to build those, pathways and ensure that, be it if you already have the protocol or if you want to co-develop the study protocol, we can help you do that. And how I like to look at it is, if you really want to engage with Highmark Health very early, then I would say the first entry point will be the Research Institute. And that way, we can clearly transition that to Vital at the point where your clinical research is completely done. Typically for Vital, what we're looking to do is we're looking to engage companies, be it just before your regulatory approval process. And I think at the earliest, we're looking at maybe 6 months before your submission. We want to make sure that, be it your submission data is complete. Maybe you've got some manuscripts that we can review, just to make sure that we're getting, well aligned before embarking. As you come out of, be it regulatory approval, if you need it, that's the other, the caveat, if you need it. As you come out of regulatory approval, what we're looking to do is completely accelerate at that point, because we've done all the back end work before your approval had come out. And so, look, we never say no to engaging in real compelling solutions. I mean, then we wouldn't be working around the spirit of innovation. So feel free to engage with us, even if it's a little bit earlier, and we're more than happy to channel you down the pathway of the Research Institute, or you're more than welcome to reach out to the Research Institute directly. But we're comfortable with both.
And how about you, Sandra?
Yeah, I would kind of tend to agree that we're kind of in the similar path, but I will say that most of the time, if we're making an investment in a company, it's just prior to Series A or Series A is usually where we're putting a lot cash in. But we would prefer to have organizations, just as Ben mentioned, come to us early. There may be an opportunity for us to help guide and help direct and provide some kind of oversight and guidance, if you will. But also we want to make sure that we aren't saying no. You know, there may not be, it's just maybe not right now. And there, we would like to help kind of open doors, but at the same time, keep an eye and see how things are going, because we know that maybe once you get to that next kind of milestone, it may be the right time for us to really get much more engaged. So I think, you know, that is probably the prime time for us, is just prior to Series A or right around a Series A. But open to talk to anybody at any time.
Great, super helpful, giving the context for that. So now, I guess maybe let's give some advice. So, Sandra, I'll start with you on this. So, is there specific advice you'd offer to that early stage company, you know, in regards to approaching you as a potential partner? You know, what are some of the questions that you ask them when you're having that first conversation?
I think a couple of things. One is making sure I understand, and I'm going to ask you very specifically what you need. What is it that you're looking for? Are you looking for a client? Are you looking for someone who's going to help you further develop to that next level? Are you just simply looking for money? And it's totally okay to answer any of those questions, but you know, I don't want it to sound like we exclude anybody, but I think it's about clarity, understanding where you are and being humble enough to also listen. Once, you know, we may have a different suggestion for an idea and an opportunity that may be within the realm of what you're trying to do. But I think the first question is, you know, what is it you need? And what do you want to grow up to be? Are you driving towards a strategic partnership? What's your exit strategy? And the exit strategy is just as important as your next step. If we as an organization understand where you're heading, it's easier for us to understand not only how we can help, but what are the other organizations that we work with that may be a better fit or create opportunity for you as well. So I think it's more of who are you? What are you looking for? And, you know, what's your exit strategy? If you have an exit strategy, this may be the company or the solution that you want to take to your grave. Totally fine too. We like people to be, you know, just as direct and open and honest about that as they possibly can.
Great. And Ben, same question for you. What are the questions, you first ask when you're sitting down talking to somebody?
Yeah, that's a great one. So most of the time, the first question is, where are you in your development, right? And so that helps me right up front to begin to triage, like, are you going through ASRI or are you a vital candidate? I think, look, I'll echo some of, or most of Sandra's sentiments. I think focus is really important, like focus and clarity. What problem are you trying to solve? One of the challenges that we come up against, and it becomes really difficult to work through, is, I think a lot of innovation companies want to be a jack of all trades. So it's, here's my solution, and it solves 10 different problems. And I think, a better approach, and what I try to tease out in that initial engagement is, here are my pain points. Which one of my pain points do you think you can solve and solve the best? Where do you have your strongest clinical evidence? So those are because sometimes there are solutions that will solve multiple problems, but I always try to guide, innovators to say, where do you have your strongest evidence? Let's use that as the key to open the door, and then we can explore other solutions later. But you're gonna, your biggest win with me is give me your strongest evidence and let me evaluate that. And so for me, it goes back to focus and clarity, and how do we get aligned on something very early, and let's explore the others. Because if we get aligned on the first solution or the first use case, we can definitely open doors to the others. So.
And, and to that point that you just made about pain points, is there, what's the easiest way for people to learn what your pain points are? Is that something that's, is listed on your website somewhere? Are there use cases that you're looking for? Or is that literally they have to sit down and talk to you and then you'll explain what the pain points are?
No, that's a great question. Look, for our pain points, we list them on our website. So Vital Innovations, we list them on our website. But as Sandra and Paul, as you know, pain points change, right? And all of a sudden, we're in a whole different ballgame today, right? And so our pain points will change. And the best way to ensure that you know what our latest focus is and where we're laying a lot of emphasis is sometimes to reach out. And sometimes it's just a quick question on LinkedIn. And you get a quick response rather than waiting to go through the email chain that sometimes, takes forever, or the website link. A quick question, a quick pointed question on LinkedIn, that's always a quick way, at least for myself, to get in contact. So I definitely recommend that. Maybe something to help, right here is given some of those examples. So some of the pain points I would tell you that I'm hyper focused on this year would be around the spaces of behavioral health, CHF, so heart failure, chronic kidney disease, and diabetes. And those are like what I'm hyper focused on. But if you go onto our website, you'll see some of the other areas. And I think I've kind of heard the same from Sandra. I've heard a couple of those. So I think we're all kind of looking at the same things.
Thanks, Ben. Sandra, anything else to add to that?
I think that's it. I would agree that, it's always easier. Just reach out and ask what those pain points are. But, if you have a solution because you're passionate about it, then the question becomes, we'll use pulmonary as an example. If you're passionate about better managing asthma patient populations, then make sure you identify a group of individuals who take care of patients or patients that have asthma and understand what their pain points are. Because if you're coming from it from a compassionate perspective because someone in your family is struggling with a particular condition, that's a very different, kind of way that you're getting started versus what are all my pain points and how can I help you? Because if you're not careful, you'll become a square peg in a round hole kind of effort. But these are consistent problems. They're consistent challenges, consistent problems. It's always about how can I treat better, faster, and more economically efficient. And they're always the major challenges and keep people safe, both employees as well as patients and providers. Those are the core challenges that we're all facing. The question is, how does your solution better identify the right component of the challenge that we're facing and address that component?
Great points. Couple other questions I want to try and get to. We got about 7 minutes left, if you can believe it, in the live broadcast. So, and a lot of questions we haven't gotten to. So let me skip ahead and just cover a couple of these. So one thing I hear people ask me a lot about is, do payers and hospitals financially contribute to clinical trials? And if they do, is there, what are some of the ways to maybe incentivize that? Is it publication and so on? So Ben, I'll start with you on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it's an interesting model. I think that, the usual is that there is some sort of shared financial responsibility on both parts. We tend to look at it as depending on how strategic that pain point is and how short the duration of time we have to solve it. You can definitely see a model where a part of our enterprise will actually, put up the money to help, solve that problem. I think what we find is pretty common is shared responsibilities. So sometimes shared financial responsibilities. And I find that to be a lot more common within this space. When we think about, our publications and incentive, this is where I think about, the completeness of the Vital program, right? And so this is where we already have a lot of that built and baked into the offering that we're delivering, right? Where we've got the publication, a publication opportunity. So I think that sometimes if you are the right candidate and you're at the right scale of your development, then I think maybe one of the easier pathways is to come into the Vital program and technically actually have all of that taken care of for you.
Thank you. And Sandra, anything on that from you?
Yeah, I think the for us, it's very interesting because I think it's absolutely spot on what Ben said. It's tied directly to the strategic value of that that pain point. How big is it, and how important is it to us as an organization? And that's critical. Number one. Number two is we will always have a number of our clinicians and practitioners, whoever is going to be utilizing this, to potentially evaluate the impact. If they're not gung-ho about it, then we're definitely not. It's a very different kind of risk for us because it takes a lot more effort and energy on our part to really drive something forward. If we've got super excited physicians and we understand that there's a very clear kind of crawl, walk, run opportunity, start points that are crystal clear, measurement points that are crystal clear, easy to get to, and short time frames, so we'll know whether or not we can scale up beyond a pilot, then we're definitely open to sharing some of the financial responsibility as well.
Great. And, mistakes, we learn as much from mistakes as we do from successes, maybe more. And so I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on mistakes that you see people make, that you've seen people make, especially early stage med tech companies, and perhaps some tips for avoiding them if you can, but at least kind of give us, as best you can, some examples of mistakes that people have made that, have caused a pilot to fail, have caused, a partnership to fail. So Ben, I'll start with you.
So this is going to be one of those, responses that sounds a little bit biased. So a lot of the mistakes that we think about, right? This is where, again, the Vital program comes in very handy because we're very rigorous upfront, and our role and our goal is to guide you through avoiding a lot of these mistakes. I mean, some of these things I've sort of talked about, in brief upfront, which is, again, trying to make sure you're very focused and you're very clear on what problem you're trying to solve. You can't be a jack of all trades. And so part of our process is helping you tease out and making sure we're all attacking the same problem in the right manner and thinking about the right outcomes that we can measure. Remember that our program is all about acceleration. So we want to make sure that we can attack the right outcomes that we can measure within a 6-month timeline, which sometimes can create some challenges. And so that's the true value proposition of our program, that you are not leaving yourself at risk to make multiple mistakes. You're coming into a well-curated, guided program that is highly competitive up front. And if you're able to get in, your chances of success are significantly higher.
How highly competitive?
That's a good question.
How many you take on a year, and how many people are applying?
Absolutely. So we review anywhere from about 300 companies a year, and we end up with a class of anywhere between 10 and 12 companies, and that's our maximum capacity for the year. So yeah, so pretty competitive. I mean, we're looking at other opportunities as to whether we want to scale it even further, but I think we're very comfortable with 10 or 12. We believe that strong innovations out there in the market. I think if we're able to work and collaborate with the top 10 or the top 12 innovators out there, I think that's a solid assessment for the year.
Great. Well, I'm glad to see a bunch of some medtech innovator companies in that mix then. That's great. And Sandra, you as well, mistakes that you've seen and experienced that you just give some quick examples and
just a couple of quick things that are they're not only mistakes, but they're also probably in full disclosure pet peeves. One is, once you've sold your solution from a concept perspective, stop selling. You don't have to keep selling. So it's very difficult to get to that next level if you always are constantly selling. So also learn how to take verbal or auditory and both visual and auditory cues to stop talking and start listening. I know that sounds very basic, but it is a skill set that helps you begin to understand that you are looking, particularly for us, looking at a collaborator. It sounds like the same thing from the standpoint of Ben's program. So you've got to be able to be open enough to understand that we want a partnership. This isn't just strictly a client vendor response kind of relationship, and it's not just a typical venture capital relationship. This is a partnership and a collaboration when we're working with an organization. So I think that's a kind of a crystal clear thing. And I think the other thing is, do not over sell. I hate to use that term again, but don't overreach. Do not overreach on the outcomes that you're hoping to achieve or that you think your solution will achieve, because people are much more prone to continue to work with you and make sure that they give you a shot if they feel like you're reasonable in what your expectations are for what your product and solution will do. And I'll say it, one more thing. The typical hockey stick financial performance is just, it's very odd to actually see it come to fruition. So be realistic in your business planning projections. And, every company does not follow a hockey stick kind of picture. So you don't think that we're looking for it, because quite honestly, a lot of times it will turn a lot of our finance folks off, quite frankly.
Excellent. Good advice from both of you. Thanks for those examples. Well, I know we have a ton of things that we would love to keep talking about. We may have to do a part 2 of this at some point to cover it all, but this has really been terrific. Really great discussion. I think I got to understand you both and your organizations a lot better. So thank you for providing those insights, and just in general, some really great advice for companies. First of all, quick question for both of you. Ben, you mentioned, reaching out to you on LinkedIn. Is that the best way to connect with you? And Sandra, same thing as well. What's the best way to connect with each of you? So Ben, first you.
For me, I think LinkedIn is most likely the best way. But we have other options, which will be, I've also got other members on my team. So if you go to the Vital website, you will get a response from them. We also have a Vital homepage on LinkedIn as well. And so any of these 3 options work very well.
Great. And Sandra?
LinkedIn is the best way, absolute best way.
And actually, just as a technical question, so do people have to connect with you first to ask that question and ask to be a connection, or can they just message you? I guess they can do it maybe in their message when they can do a connection request. They can maybe ask the question too.
Totally fine with just a question. You don't have to connect.
Okay, good.
Likewise.
Good. Just checking on that. We don't want to be friends with people we don't know, right? It's always dangerous. All right. So guys, terrific job. Thank you both so much. These are programs I highly recommend. These are institutions I highly recommend working with. We know a lot of people, we interact with a lot of people, and these are just 2 terrific organizations who've been involved with MedTech Innovator as well. We don't just have you, here in the broadcast today, you've been part of the program. So thank you both for that. For all of you who are watching on YouTube, we're going to end the first part of this now. And that means that you'll be able to, again, watch this as a replay later if you want on YouTube Live or medtechinnovator.org/live. And also, again, look at the broadcasts that are coming up. There's some really interesting ones that'll still be coming up. We're going to be covering health equity, which is a really important topic right now, among other things. So please tune in for that. We also had our showcase this last week, where the 62 companies in MedTech Innovator's current U.S. program participated in a showcase. There's a link to that on the homepage of MedTech Innovator's website. So if you want to learn about our startups, go to medtechinnovator.org, and you'll just see a banner at the top where you can click to watch recordings. It'll actually give you a page where you can actually watch not only the archive recordings from the showcase, which includes Q&A in 3 different tracks, but you can also individually see the little descriptions about each one of our companies. And there's a little play button on top of each of them, and you can hit the play button and watch just their presentation. So it's a great way to find out about the companies. And more importantly, there's a connect button you can click to connect with those companies. if you want to learn more about them, whether you want to maybe work for them, if you want to invest in them, partner with them in some way, or if they're on the market, if you want to use their solution. So medtechinnovator.org, and just click on that link in the banner, and that'll take you to that page. So again, thank you all for tuning in today. For our panelists, please don't disconnect, and our startups, don't disconnect. We're going to take another 25 minutes and do some Q&A. So thanks, everyone, and we'll look forward to seeing you on our live stream here again next week, same time, 10:30